Did Alex get the Zoom end up working or not?
I got it working now.
Oh, who's like the top business person?
All right. Well, it's 10:50.
And restaurant. Goodbye, Ron.
Okay. We can start now. Okay. So, hi everyone. Again, my name is Alex. I'm the moderator for this OMNI conference. So individual presentations get 15 minutes. I have a sign. I'll let you know how much time you have left. And then we'll have a Q&A session, 5-minute Q&A session after each presentation. So yeah, that's about it. We have a first presenter, Charlotte. So you can start when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Crewse, and my project focuses on examining the voting habits and behavior of young adults in America. My project aims to first make sense of young adult voter turnout in America, then compare those rates to similar democracies, also examine the social justice implications of the issue, and lastly, offer some possible solutions. Young adults are often viewed as a paragon of social activism. Think back to the 1960s university protests, even to those of today. But young adults repeatedly fail to leave their mark at the polls. This issue of low young adult voter turnout has long plagued America, and its proliferation has had lasting negative effects on the stability of democracy nationwide. So starting with my research findings here, after the 2020 general election, the US Census Bureau reported that nearly 26 million young adults aged 18 to 29 did not partake in the election. While 59% of adults 18 to 24 were registered to vote in 2020, just 51.4% actually cast their vote. And similarly, 59.7% of 25 to 29-year-olds were eligible to vote, but only 51.2% did so. When looking at the historical trends of young adult voter turnout, we can see that over the past 3 general elections, it has been on the rise. With this in mind, it's important to ask ourselves, what can we do to support these young adult voters, and how do we engage even more non-voters? Well, looking forwards to the 2024 general election, 40.8 million members of Generation Z, ages 18 to 27, will be eligible to vote, making up nearly 1/5 of the American electorate. Luckily, one Tufts University survey reported that 57% of the youth they polled said they were extremely likely to vote in the 2024 general election. Hopefully, this 6% predicted increase in young adult voter turnout will become a reality. While general elections are often viewed as the most critical and influential, midterm elections tend to have the most realized impact. This is because in midterm elections, young adults and citizens of all ages elect those congresspeople that will go on to enact legislation that affects their day-to-day lives. Looking at the past 3 midterm elections, we can see a massive disparity between young adult voter turnout and that of the total population. In 2014, just 13% of young adults voted in the midterm election, while 41% of the entire population did so. In 2018, we saw the highest young adult voter turnout in a midterm election in history, with 28% of young adults partaking in the election. In 2022, there was a bit of a dip when only 23% of young adults took part in the election and 53% of the entire population did so. So what are the impacts of this? Why is this an issue that citizens should care about and pour resources into? Well, young adults establish the voter footprint of their generation, which can have lasting negative effects. When young adults don't form the habit of voting early on, they are likely to exhibit low voter turnout throughout their entire adult lives. And when total voter turnout declines, so does the legitimacy of democracy. This is because low voter turnout leads to political choices that don't represent the will of the people. And when this happens, citizens will begin to place less value on democratic processes, which over time may become entirely obsolete. To combat this, it's important and it's crucial that citizens develop the habit of voting in their young adult years so that their generation will go on to contribute to a rise in voter turnout instead of a decline. To address the suboptimal young adult voter turnout rates, it's essential to first delve into their motivations to forego voting. 19.2% of 18 to 24-year-olds cited not interested as their primary grounds for not participating in the 2020 general election. However, not interested is a very broad term and doesn't disclose any information about where young adult non-voters' disinterest stems from. The Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement reported that just over a third of youth feel supported to act on their political concerns. More specifically, only 35% of young people report that there are people, organizations, or resources in their community that can help them make sense of and act on social and political issues. Additionally, less than 1 in 5 young adults have heard from a political party or a community organization this year. It is important to broaden our perspective on this issue, and one way to do that is to conduct a global comparison. Across the total voting eligible population, US voter registration rates soar above those of similar democracies. We can see that 94% of the American voting eligible population is registered to vote, the highest of any OECD country. However, our actual voter turnout lags behind over half of those countries. When compared to similar democracies, the United States exhibits a distinct level of apathy towards the electoral process. Unlike countries where voting is compulsory or civic education is more robust, American citizens face less incentive and social pressures to cast their vote. This undoubtedly impacts the voting turnout rate of young adults, as they inherit that cultural attitude from older generations. One really important piece of this issue is its social justice implications. Young adult voter turnout typically declines in marginalized communities, specifically those of Black and Latino youth. One pre-election survey found that only 44% of Black youth and 51% of Latino youth consider themselves extremely likely to vote in our upcoming general election, compared to 62% of white young adults and 68% of Asian American youth. Additionally, youth of marginalized communities are less likely to feel qualified to vote. While 62% of all young adults reported that they felt qualified to vote, just 47% of Black youth and 52% of Latino youth felt the same. These gaps can be traced back to historical inequities in the distribution of election resources and voter registration information. In marginalized communities where election resources are scarce, the habit of voting is much less likely to be instilled in young adults. Additionally, racial minorities' voting abilities are more likely to be negatively impacted by voter identification laws and felon disenfranchisement. These barriers to voting lead to negative feedback loops, with decreased representation in government, leading to less funding for election resources and therefore lower young adult voter turnout in those communities. So what are some possible ways to mitigate these issues? Well, one possible solution is school programs, such as civics curriculum beginning even as early as the elementary level, which emphasizes the importance of voting and distributes knowledge about the election process, voter registration, and reliable sources for candidate and issue information, not just for our general elections, but midterms and primaries as well. Currently, over a quarter of states don't require students to demonstrate proficiency in civics in order to graduate from high school. Additionally, only 20 states include civics education in their curriculum accountability frameworks. As we can see, this is definitely something America has room to grow in. Another possible strategy is more young adult-centered outreach. Political organizations should aim to connect with young adults on their preferred social media platforms in order to have the furthest reach. Published content on those platforms should not only engage individual young adult voters, but also spur conversations between peers so that youth may mobilize and motivate each other instead of having to rely on that day-to-day direction and interaction from those organizations. Candidates or campaigns may also consider celebrity endorsements. One study from the University of Washington indicated that higher receptivity to celebrity spokespeople predicted lower levels of voter apathy. So if those campaigns and candidates can secure a celebrity endorsement, those young adults that the celebrity interacts with are actually more likely to vote. Something else to consider is automatic voter registration, like the California Motor Voter Act, which automatically registers citizens to vote when they complete certain transactions at the DMV. Currently, just 24 states and the District of Columbia have similar systems established. While these programs may not directly encourage more young adults to vote, they do remove a significant barrier to voting and ensure that many young adults are registered to vote before election deadlines. One last proposed solution is altering election laws, specifically changing identification requirements to lessen the financial burden on young adult voters, especially those of marginalized communities. Something else to consider is lowering our voting age to 16 or 17, such as the case in Austria, Germany, Belgium, and many other European democracies. With a lower voting age, young adults are involved in political decisions sooner, hopefully encouraging them to enter our political discussions. Also, young people under 18 are likely to still be in school and living with their families, two factors that have been proven to encourage voter turnout. In the long term, the higher level of participation at a young age may then facilitate positive generational voter footprints. As was shown, young adult voter turnout is on the rise. However, there are still many programs to be considered that may ensure a continued upward trend and encourage even more young adult non-voters.
All right, so we'll open this up to a 5-minute Q&A. Questions, comments?
I have one. What is your opinion on the attitude that a lot of young people have, which is like, oh, well, my vote doesn't matter, so I'm not gonna do it?
Yeah, I think that some young adults feel that way, or a ton of them do, and so they don't, engage in our political system. And I think it is hard to know that your vote will count when there's a lot of information and a lot of reality that shows us that it doesn't necessarily. And that can be hard to, get past in order to cast your vote. But I think a good starting place is just getting everybody more involved in, our politics in the first place. Yeah.
So I know you had a slide in there about compulsive voting registration, right?
Or automatic voter
Automatic.
registration.
So I was thinking you can still get people to vote, but if it's mandatory, that would cause them, some of them would not care, or still not care at all, and just vote randomly, whatever. Have you read into that, or or are you just looking for more participation?
Well, in my slide specifically, I didn't suggest compulsory voting. I know that's the case in Australia and I think a few other countries where you may face fines if you don't vote. But I know in a lot of places that it's not necessarily enforced. But I do agree with you that if compulsory voting were to become a reality in the United States, that many people, you couldn't necessarily increase their engagement in politics and they would just vote randomly. I agree. And that wouldn't really have any positive benefits. Yeah. Yes.
We were talking about some potential voter apathy at the national level, and especially with the Electoral College.
Sure.
Do you have suggestions for getting young people to be more politically active in local communities and local votes, so that perhaps they could see more of a change or have a direct impact?
Yeah, I think that's super important as well. This was a little bit more broad scale, but there is more impact to be had at the local level. And young adults, I think also at the local level, it is a bit easier to get involved because you have smaller organizations that you can become a part of and it doesn't feel so daunting. And I think that getting involved in those kinds of organizations, whether they be partisan or nonpartisan, is really important and can help young adults engage in the political system around them.
Do you think that there are certain changes that could be made within the government at a federal and a local level that could encourage young people to actually get more involved, like setting term limits on certain positions?
Yeah, I agree with you that especially young adults are especially affected by that feeling of, the people in the government being so much older than them. And yeah, especially in Congress, right? So term limits could definitely mitigate those negative effects of that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte.